What if I just stop paying you a salary, Carla, and start paying you and calling it tips?
We could try that and see how it goes.
Okay, now how would you feel if first-time homebuyers in 2025 got a $10,000 tax credit and you didn't because you bought yours in 2024?
DeSantis did this in Florida, and he basically lit the market on fire even further. There's legislation in Congress right now to create a tax credit for unpaid caregivers. His words were, "We will end all taxes on overtime."
How does it feel to be 42 and wondering where all this, this money's not going into fund Social Security and you might not see it? Does it make you nervous?
But we have reached a point where whatever they do, they're going to have to take drastic and painful measures to, save it at this point. Everybody forgets you're paying into the system, but the dollars you pay in are not coming directly back to you.
Do you want to just send me the check directly?
We could do that.
Just bypass the government?
Yeah.
Okay.
If they did remove the tax on Social Security payments, that would bump up insolvency by 1 year.
I'm sorry, you young people are going to have to work so much harder to support people like me. How much of this stuff do you think will actually come to pass? Hey guys, and welcome to Money Talks News, the podcast. We're going to make you richer every single day, and today we're going to have a really special guest with us. It is Carla Baucher. Carla is our managing editor here at Money Talks News, and Carla is not only our managing editor, but is a brilliant writer, and the reason she's on our podcast today, we're honored to have her, is because she wrote an article that was just awesome. And I read it and I sent her an email immediately saying this is one of the best articles I've written. And it has done many, many hundreds of thousands of page views on our site and on MSN. So we know it's a good article. And it's called 8 Groups Who Can Expect New Tax Breaks Under Trump. Now, I've done a lot of reading about Trump, obviously since the election. But there was some stuff on here. I guess I knew it because I'd read it before. But I'd forgotten how many promises this guy made about taxes. So let's go over them one at a time. Do you have the article in front of you, Carla?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So lay something out. What's one of the changes that he's proposing?
So everybody's familiar with his promise to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that went into effect in 2018. But he actually did make a lot of additional tax promises. So we went through his official platform, and we went through things that he had said on the campaign trail and identified 8 additional tax deduction, tax cuts, some form of tax break. 3 of those are from his formal platform, and those ones are no tax on tips and a tax break for caregivers who take care of family that they're unpaid for it, not paid for it. And the third one was a break for new homeowners.
Okay. Let's go over these things one at a time.
Right.
Okay. Everybody's probably familiar with the tax or the tax on tips thing. That's something that Kamala Harris also said she would do. But the idea is they're not going to, no federal income tax on tips.
Right.
Who does it affect?
Well, that's part of the question, because of course these promises don't come with great detail about how they would be executed. But at the least, both of the candidates talked about how that would help people who work in restaurants or in hospitality. But in reality, there's people who work part-time, for Uber, and they get tips. It's unclear how they will define tips if this, becomes law. But
what if I just stop paying you a salary, Carla, and start paying you and calling it tips?
That's a good point. We could try that and see how it goes.
Now, and by the way, we should also say, and I should have said this at the outset, these are promises that Trump made or things that he suggested that he wanted to do, but that doesn't make them automatically done. Right.
And most of the ones that we identified are not in his formal platform, and they're things that he kind of he announced after Harris became his opponent and gave him some more competition. Some of them were clearly made as just kind of looking for attention at a time when she was getting a lot of attention from media. So, yes, I don't expect most of those to go anywhere, but.
Yep. And this may be an unfair question, and you can certainly tell me if it is. If I said to you, what are the odds that this happens? Would you have no idea whatsoever, or would you say maybe?
Well, I think you can put more weight on the ones that were in his written formal platform that he had posted to his website even before Biden left the race.
Okay.
And so those are that he put these in writing. It's basically a outline a few pages long of all his plans, according to him. And so those have been in his plans from the beginning. They're not just things that he blurted out on the campaign trail to get attention. Some of them got no attention, like the one for unpaid caregivers, for people who some kind of tax break for them. And I think that's probably one of the ones most likely to happen because there's existing legislation for that.
No, these federal taxes have to be approved or changed by law.
Right.
So in other words, it's going to take both houses of Congress to get any of this stuff done, right? Okay, but we also hasten to add that the president has both houses of Congress. He's got a majority in both the Senate and the House. So a lot of this stuff could come to pass. Mm-hmm. So now let's go back to because we had a lot of stuff to cover.
Okay.
As far as the tips go, that we don't know exactly who's going to be covered, presumably restaurant workers, but it could also be anybody who gets a tip. Now, that sounds fun. Sounds great. Is there a downside to it?
Yes. Well, of course, that's a massive amount of tax revenue that the government would lose out on. And so that would be a problem if they don't pass that as part of legislation that has some other way to make up the cost, the loss of taxes.
And one of the things he's talked about is using tariffs to offset the lack of income taxes. Almost all of these proposals end up with the government pulling in less tax revenue, right? And many of them too, or some of them at least, also Social Security. They're not collecting Social Security on that money either, or we don't know that.
Well, right.
Well,
neither of the candidates said whether because when you say no taxes on tips, there's 3 different kinds of federal taxes that can mean. That can mean income taxes, that can mean Social Security taxes, and that could mean Medicare taxes.
Right.
So, in fairness, all candidates do it. They make promises without getting into the nitty-gritty details of how they would execute them. So there is a lot we don't know.
Now, you also mentioned first-time home buyers. Let's go to that topic next. What did he promise for first-time home buyers?
Okay, so his words, it's not clear if this is going to be a tax deduction or tax credit. He said to help new home buyers, Republicans will promote home ownership through tax incentives and support for first-time buyers. So some form of tax break for first-time home buyers. We've had these in the past. We had them as recently as under Obama's administration. But that was actually a tax credit that had to be repaid. So it wasn't nearly as good as it sounded like. To this day, there are people repaying that. And if you ever pay attention, there's a line on your tax return that asks you if you received that credit in 2008 because they're still collecting on that. So it was really like a tax-free loan, which, in my opinion, not all that helpful. But
this might turn into a tax credit. But it's very vague. What he said is very vague.
He doesn't even say tax credit or deduction. That's correct. It is very vague.
Okay. Now, you bought a house in the last year, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I bought my
Okay. Now, how would you feel if first-time home buyers in 2025 got a $10,000 tax credit and you didn't because you bought yours in 2024?
I would be glad because those kinds of incentives, it helps one party at another party's cost. If you give first-time buyers an incentive to go buy a home, more of them are going to go rush out and buy a home, and prices are going to go up for everyone. DeSantis did this in Florida, and we did not take advantage of it. we didn't really look into it much once we realized it was basically like a reverse mortgage. You're going to pay the money back, basically.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that even
it
happened.
started out as
first-time
something
homebuyer.
he created for first responders and maybe certain other groups. And then in just a year or two ago, he expanded it to basically make it available, I want to all first-time buyers. And I want to say it was like $25,000. And we looked into it, but actually I don't recall if we made there's a threshold for income to qualify for that. But even if we had qualified, it was not, and we were mad at him for doing that because he basically lit the market on fire even further when we were already struggling to find a house that, you can afford.
Yeah. Caregivers. Let's go to caregivers. Now, this was first of all, again, how vague is this one? I mean, is it real? Is it going to happen?
Well, this is what this is another one that was in his document. So the words of his campaign were Republicans will support unpaid family caregivers through tax credits. So this is one where he actually says it's going to be a tax credit. And it so happens that there's legislation, it hasn't gone anywhere, but there's legislation in Congress right now to create a tax credit for unpaid caregivers. And so it would be very easy for Republicans to just chuck that into some other bill and make it happen. I personally believe this is the one of these 8 breaks that is most likely to come to pass. And this is a lot of people suffer with this, basically.
Yeah.
And
they would be getting a tax credit. So in other words, just to be clear, I'm taking care of my aging parents. And then, so I get a $5,000 credit on my income taxes. That's the way it would work?
Something along those lines. He doesn't specify whether it would be refundable or non-refundable, but it could potentially lower your tax bill and potentially increase your refund.
Okay. And then let's take 1 second here, just for our novice listeners. Refundable versus non-refundable tax credit. What's that?
Okay. Most of them are non-refundable. Those are much less useful. You have to owe taxes in order to take advantage of it. It only helps you if you owe taxes. So if you're someone who always gets a refund every year, a non-refundable credit is useless to you.
So like the earned income credit, right, or the child tax credit, those are refundable credits.
The child tax credit is partially refundable. And the earned income credit is refundable, but virtually every other tax credit is non-refundable.
Okay. So just to be clear for those folks out there listening, a refundable credit means that if you owe nothing on taxes, you're going to get a check in the mail. I mean, even if you don't pay any taxes, you're going to get a check in the mail if it's a refundable credit. So that's awesome. If it's non-refundable, if you're getting a refund, doesn't matter at all, right?
Right. It won't.
Okay.
It won't change your bottom line.
Overtime. This is a big one too. I'd forgotten he said this, but he did. Overtime workers are not going to get taxed on overtime. Is that the deal?
That is, his words were, we will end all taxes on overtime. If we take that literally, all taxes on overtime means, again, all 3 types of federal taxes: income taxes, Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes. But this has been heavily criticized even by more conservative leading organizations because you kind of... this can skew the job market in unintended ways. So,
like what? How do you mean?
Well, the Tax Foundation had said that it would distort the labor market decisions because it might change how much a company wants to offer overtime, and it's certainly going to incentivize people to take more overtime. And then a larger share of their income is not taxed. I mean, how that could lead to more loss of revenue for the government than is intended there. But
that's another thing.
It stands to influence the decisions made by companies and workers.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. A couple of these things we've talked about so far, overtime and tips. This is money that's no longer being, or perhaps anyway, not helping Social Security, which means Social Security is going to go bankrupt sooner. Or not bankrupt is not the right word. That's
they'll exhaust the reserves.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I'm 69. In fact, I have to start taking Social Security soon. So I'm pretty clear that I'm going to get what I'm owed.
Right.
How does it feel to be 42 and wondering where all this, this money is not going into fund Social Security and you might not see it? Does it make you nervous?
Well, I think a lot of people I know already are going about their retirement savings. They're saving for retirement under the assumption that the Social Security is not going to be there. And then if it is, that's a bonus. I mean, the government, you've said this before, the government is always going to save it. But we have reached a point where whatever they do, they're going to have to take drastic and painful measures to, save it at this point. So
that's really interesting, though, Carla, that people your age or younger might think that it's just a bonus. I mean, you're paying lots of money into this.
Yes.
I mean, we all have, obviously, and especially those of us who are self-employed, as we both are. We're paying 13% into Social Security. That's a lot of money we're putting in there.
Yes.
And to treat it like a bonus is a bummer. I mean, I feel bad for younger people.
What a lot of people forget is the way that paying into the Social Security system works is you're not putting that, the government's not holding it there for when I retire. They're immediately sending out to people currently retired. So a year from now, when you start collecting, my Social Security taxes will be going to your Social Security payment and everyone else who's currently retired at that time. So everybody forgets you're paying into the system, but the dollars you pay in are not coming directly back to you.
Do you want to just send me the check directly?
We could do that.
Just bypass the government?
Yeah.
Okay. As a matter of fact, this is another thing I was going to ask you about. Social Security is one of the things on here, because Social Security recipients, he wants to pay no taxes, right?
Honestly, I believe this is one least likely to happen. He said this, it wasn't even announced at a rally or at some campaign function. He just blurted this out on social media in all capital letters, and all he said is seniors should not pay taxes on Social Security. He did run with this, but this is, I believe they both said things to buy votes, and I believe that's one of them. He has to be smart enough to know that the cost of that. And
one of the things I learned recently, Carlo, was that the taxes, the federal income tax you pay on Social Security, which you do if you make over $32,000, I think, from adjusted gross income, isn't that right?
For retirees,
and then,
no one pays taxes on all of their Social Security income. You pay it on a portion,
half,
and it's up to 80% of it. As much it depends.
It's 85%, I think.
It could, yes, that could be 80 something, but it's more complicated than what you said. It depends on how much retirement income you're receiving.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. Here's what I didn't know that I know now: that the federal income tax you're paying on your Social Security is going directly to Social Security. I mean, so in other words, that could cause the Social Security fund to run out faster.
Can say that again?
Okay. Rather than it going into the general fund, when you pay federal income taxes on Social Security, it goes into the Social Security trust fund. So in other words, the trust fund will be depleted faster without the tax on Social Security.
Yes.
See, I just thought it was general, like the income tax we pay. I thought, income tax on Social Security just went to the general fund of the government. But it actually is helping prop up Social Security.
The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget did an analysis, and they determined that if they did remove the tax on Social Security payments, that would bump up insolvency by 1 year. It would happen 1 year sooner.
And insolvency is supposed to be like 2033, right?
I believe it's currently 2032. Yes. So they're saying if it's currently 2032, it would become 2031 that it's exhausted.
I'm sorry, you young people are going to have to work so much harder to support people like me in Social Security, because I'm going to get mine. I'm hoping anyway. Okay, car loan holders. He said he wasn't going to tax interest on car loans. This sounds kind of bogus to me.
It's actually been law in the past.
Has it?
Many types of interests have been exempt in the past, many more than currently are. Have been exempt in the past. But this is something he announced to the Detroit Economic Club when it first came out, and he billed this to them as something. He talked about what it would do for their industry, and so this is another one that arguably is designed to buy a certain group's votes.
Yeah.
If you ask me.
Well, the reason I said it was bogus too is because almost everybody uses a standard deduction. You have to itemize in order to deduct taxes on a car loan, and
Well,
you know
no,
that
it
means
depends.
you've got
The
to.
law's not written. If they're going to make it law, they can decide if it's going.
Oh, you're right.
They can
You're
decide
right.
that. They can decide whether it's available to everyone or whether you have to itemize.
Yeah, it would be weird to have it above the line, though, I think. But anyway, the bottom line is everybody gets a next year $30,000. I mean, married couple, that is, a $30,000 standard deduction, and half that if you're single, $15,000. So unless you have more than that deductions, you ain't deducting anything.
Right. Since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went into effect in 2018, the estimate from the IRS is that about 88% of people take the standard deduction. So
that's what I meant when I said bogus. Unless, like you said, they make us an exception for people with car loans.
Right.
Okay. Now, what about salt?
Yes.
Talk to me.
So this is ironic because it's Trump's law from 2017 that put the cap on the SALT deduction. This is state and local taxes. So when people who live in states with high property taxes, if they itemize, they can deduct property taxes and other types of local taxes. But his bill from 2017, it used to be no limit to how much SALT you could deduct, but he capped it at $10,000. And so this is another one that just came about on social media, probably at a time when he felt he needed attention. So he said, I will get SALT back. But in reality, he's promising to undo something he did in the first place. So it's kind of curious.
Yeah. And so let's go ahead and recap. By the way, we promised 8 things in this article. The last thing is Americans living abroad. It doesn't affect that many people.
Sure.
But basically, he said he doesn't want to tax people. If you live abroad and you get income in the United States, you pay tax on it. But he wants that to go away, essentially. And whether that's going to occur or not, who knows? But here's the thing. If you're looking at this whole thing in total, Carla, and I know you do a lot of reading on this stuff, and I'm not holding your feet to the fire here. I mean, anything could happen. How much of this stuff do you think will actually come to pass?
I believe a minority of it will come to pass, but I would also be surprised if none of it came to pass. So
you said you would be surprised if none came to pass.
I expect a minority of these to happen, or they'll become part of legislation in some form or another. Like I said, I think the one for unpaid caregivers is most likely to happen. The legislation's already sitting there in Congress. So it's been written. They can just add it to some other legislation to make it happen.
You would agree though that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is probably that's probably item number 1, right? Because
for him,
that's
it's extending
that's set to expire.
Yes.
It's sunsetting in 2025, right?
After 25, yeah.
Okay, so that means that's job 1, I would assume, for Trump and both houses of Congress to extend that.
Yes.
And maybe in that they start adding some other stuff in.
That's kind of what I mean. That's when I would expect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, it sounds really good for those of us who pay a lot of income tax. But there is one thing that is a drawback too. Although the stock market doesn't seem to be recognizing it, all of these things that bring in less tax to the government makes our deficit bigger. Unless, there's some other offsetting revenue source like tariffs or whatever. But to me, that means, okay, if the deficit keeps getting bigger and bigger, it's going to force interest rates higher, and that's going to hurt.
Well,
consumers.
I mean, you have to take this in the context of all of his promises. He's also got promises to just drastically scale back government. I mean, he's started the what does DOGE stand for again? Department of Government Efficiency.
Yes, I think
for
that's
the
right.
sole explicit purpose of finding places to cut money so the government doesn't. So he's already said the government spends too much money. So he can pay for, I mean, at least theoretically, he could scale back government to, compensate for tax cuts. But
Gee, I've never heard anyone promise that before. Scaling back government. I've seen lots and lots of elections, and I'll be damned if every single one of them didn't include politicians saying they were going to cut back on government waste. I mean, geez, they all say that. Whether he does it or not, maybe he's going to do something that's never been done. Maybe he's going to make government smaller. We'll see. Or maybe Musk will. We'll see. And I guess we're just about out of time. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Carla, before we quit?
I think that covers it for me.
Cool. Well, I certainly appreciate you being on this podcast, and I insist that you do it some other time. That's what happens when you write brilliant articles like this one. It was really great.
Sounds good.
And for those of you out here listening, keep listening and watching. And you can follow us in all kinds of places. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We have a retirement group on Facebook. Obviously, the Money Talks News, you want to be a member of our website and take our newsletter. And we're even on Instagram. And I don't even look at Instagram. We're everywhere. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting us. I said that specifically for my producer who hates when I say that. Okay, guys, I want you to tune in next time, and I want you to have a great day. We're going to see you again real soon.